All right, so in today's lesson, we're going to be looking at working with chalk pastels. So first thing, you want to make sure that you have everything you need. So we have drawing paper that is coarse, and what I've done is I folded it in half. So this part here is where we're going to do our practice, but it's also going to work like our cover sheet. And this is where we're going to do our little drawing, our little painting. You want to have some pastels. I have these Praying Gallery pastels. They're pretty good. And you want to have like a damp paper towel because you will start to get really dirty. So from time to time, you're going to want to wipe your fingers off. And that's really all you need. So let's get started. So chalk pastels are nothing more than compressed pigment, and they come in these little bars, or you can get them in pencils, or you can get them in thicker bars. And they come in a variety of colors that you can use to mix colors, to blend colors, to layer colors, which is what we're going to do. When you get these, it's okay. They break very easily, like that. You can break them to whatever size you need. You can use the points. You can use the sides to work with. And you're going to be doing most of the work with your fingers. But on occasion, you might need like a little blending stump in order to get into tight areas. But for this one, we don't. Okay. When the pastels come from the factory, this particular brand, they use like a real thin layer of lacquer or something to protect them. So like when you first start working with them, sometimes they don't work so good. So get some scrap paper and start rubbing that layer off. You can actually see that shiny part, that's that lacquer layer. And then once you rub it off, then you actually see the true color of the pastel. So on some scrap paper, make sure you always have some scrap paper so that you can start kind of taking that layer off before they'll work properly. Otherwise, they feel like crayons for a little bit and it's not so good to work with. You can also use really, really fine sandpaper, which I've done in the past, like 400 grit sandpaper. Works pretty well to do that. But this paper that I'm using is pretty coarse, so it works pretty well for doing this as well. And I just do them as I need them. That's one of the reasons why I have the side that I'm going to do my picture on and the side that I use for practicing and other stuff. Okay. So first thing that you need to do is kind of just get used to working with the pastels and just kind of play around a little bit, put some colors down, work them in with your hands, try changing colors. For example, if I want to make an area a little bit lighter, I can take and I can add white to it. And yes, sometimes there'll be other colors on the pastels. If that bothers you, make sure that you wipe them off on a scrap piece of paper. Okay. When you're mixing your pastels, you don't need a lot of pressure. So you put your colors down and then you just gently rub them with your fingers. If you squeeze too hard, you're actually going to remove too much of the colors. So the first layer you got to put in and work it into the paper. But then after that, you're just going to be building layers on top of layers. You can also put colors next to each other and work them. So like this one's really dirty, so I'm going to clean it first. Okay. Now instead of putting it on top, I'm going to put it just below it. And then I'm going to blend them together. Before I blend them, I'm going to go ahead and take my wet rag or my wet paper towel, and I'm going to get some of this off my hand. Okay. If your hands get too dirty, you can always go to and wash them at the sink. And then very, very gently rubbing them together. You can see it creates a new color. So you have yellow here, you have blue here, and of course when those two meet, you have green. Now if you wanted a lighter green, like a yellow green, you would add more yellow. If you wanted a darker green, you can add more of the blue. Pastels are not considered permanent, so be careful, because if you rub too much, you can take them off. And actually, sometimes we do take some off with a kneaded eraser in order to add on. So let's say, for example, that I wanted to put something in here, but I have too much of a pastel, too much of a buildup. I can take a paper towel, take some of this off just by rubbing. So you can see how much of that came off. And then when I go to put in the lighter color, it'll stick better. You can actually see it a lot better than if I went directly over the blue. Remember, when you're starting to do layering, like we're going to be doing here, make sure that you tap gently so you don't lose all your colors. Don't rub. If I rub like this, you're going to lose the whole effect. So just tap, and you're good to go. And you can build up layers after layer after layer. Okay. You can draw with pastels, so it's similar to drawing with charcoal. And I'm just going to pick a color, any color, and you can use the corners, and you can just start drawing whatever you want. You can draw thicker. You can even use the side. So like, let's say I had a bigger tree here, I could actually use the side instead of the tips. And you can see that I'm going right over the color that's already there. And that's one of the things we're going to talk about when we start working on our little painting. You can color, or you can create like little canopies just by first putting in your base coat. So let's say that this is going to be the top of a tree. So I would put in this case, I'm going to go with the green. Wiping off. Sometimes you have to blow it off. Just don't blow it onto your partners there, so you don't get stuff all over them. Or you can pick up your paper and then just like tap it like that. That works also. Okay. So just like when we work with colored pencils or markers or anything else, you have to establish a light source. So let's say that I want my light source coming from here. Then I can get in here right on top of that nice rich green and put a little yellow in there. And that makes that side of the green of the canopy a little bit lighter. And then where the two meet, I'm just going to touch them. Just touch them a little bit so that they blend a little bit. On the opposite side, if I want to go darker to create a strong shadow, you can either use black or you can use purple. I like to use purple and mix it in with the green. So I'm going to remove that layer. And then, just on the outer edge, put a little bit of purple in there. And then just tap. So the big thing about when you start working with pastels, you need to think of them as if you were painting. So you're going to be working in layers. You're going to be doing, you're going to start with the background stuff first, and then you're going to be adding stuff on front of it. You're going to be creating highlights and shadows, cast shadows, and you're going to be doing a lot of blending. So let's go ahead and get started.